Have you ever noticed how certain people seem to hold a quiet authority over the world around them? They don't shout, demand, or beg. Instead, they withdraw, and when they do, everything shifts. The atmosphere changes. People feel unsettled, and suddenly those who once took them for granted begin to chase after their presence. It's almost as if silence itself becomes a force more powerful than 1,000 words. Now imagine applying this same principle to your own life. Imagine what would happen if you stopped reacting instantly to every message, every provocation, every subtle demand for your attention. What if, instead of rushing to defend yourself or to explain, you chose silence? Instead of exploding in frustration, you stepped back with intention. Jung believed that in moments like this, the game of human interaction changes completely. When you are no longer always available emotionally, mentally, physically, the people around you are thrown into crisis. Why? Because so much of human interaction is built on predictability. People often control you through your reactions, through your need to please, through your impulse to always respond. But the day you decide to step back, their grip on you begins to slip. Suddenly, the ones who thought they knew you realize they only knew the version of you that was constantly accessible. The mystery of who you are beyond that availability unsettles them. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to a better understanding of ourselves." Consider this: when you withdraw, who becomes irritated? Who grows restless? Who tries to provoke you just to elicit some reaction? These responses reveal more about them than they do about you. They also expose just how often you've been manipulated without realizing it. Think of all the times you've said yes when you wanted to say no. All the times you've rushed to reply even while exhausted. All the times you've given away your emotional energy just to avoid conflict or rejection. With every forced smile, every immediate response, every attempt to keep the peace, you've handed over pieces of yourself. And at the end of the day, what's left? Fatigue, frustration, an emptiness that can't be explained. This happens because you've been too available to those who don't even deserve a minute of your silence. And Jung's work reminds us, this isn't about abandoning the world or becoming cold. It's about choosing yourself. It's about understanding what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming whole, authentic, and complete. And that process often begins with silence, not the silence of fear, but the silence of strength. Withdrawal, when done from awareness rather than avoidance, is an act of sovereignty. So the real question becomes, how much longer will you let your emotions be controlled by others? How much longer will you dance like a puppet every time someone presses on your wounds? Perhaps it's time to cut those strings, to reclaim your presence, to become a mystery again. Because when you stop being endlessly available, everything changes. From the time we were children, many of us were conditioned to believe that being available equates to being worthy. We were praised when we responded quickly, when we smiled, even though we were hurting, when we put others before ourselves. Over the years, this conditioning hardened into a belief that our value depends on how much we give, how present we are, and how well we serve the needs of others. But here's the truth. No one teaches us early enough. Excessive availability is not a virtue. It's a trap. When you are always present, always reachable, always saying yes, you become predictable. And what is predictable often becomes a tool. People begin to treat you less like a human being and more like an emotional button. They can press whenever they want, comfort, validation, or distraction. Think about it. That friend who only calls when they're in crisis. The partner who expects you to carry the weight of their emotions. The colleague who leans on you for reassurance, but vanishes when you need support. These dynamics are not accidental. They thrive because you are accessible, and because you haven't yet questioned the cost of being so. Carl Jung spoke about the persona, the mask we wear to be accepted by society. This mask often whispers that we must always be agreeable, always helpful, always available. It convinces us that if we're not constantly meeting others' needs, we'll be rejected or abandoned. And so, we say it's fine when we're actually suffocating. We answer texts immediately, even when we desperately need rest. We explain ourselves in detail, justify our decisions, and defend our boundaries as if we owe our very existence to the world. But the more we center ourselves around others' needs, the more we vanish from our own life. Being perpetually available is, in truth, a form of self-abandonment. It's a disguised way of seeking approval and a subtle attempt to control how others perceive us. The price, however, is steep. Your peace erodes, your energy drains, and at some point, you realize you've built a life where everyone else is at the center except you. Here's the cruel paradox. The more available you are, the less value people assign to you. Abundance breeds disregard. When something or someone is always there, it stops feeling precious. People start to see you not as a rare soul, but as an endless resource they can tap into. And what happens to resources that seem infinite? They get exploited. So pause for a moment and ask yourself, who truly deserves your time, your presence, your attention, and perhaps more importantly, who deserves your absence? Before you can answer, though, Jung urged us to examine the root of why we give ourselves away so easily. Why do we react immediately? Why do we rush to please? Why do we struggle to hold our silence? The answer lies in one of Jung's most profound concepts, psychic energy. Carl Jung viewed the human psyche not as a cold machine, but as a living energy system. Every thought, every emotion, and every action draws from this reservoir of psychic energy. The key question then becomes, are you consciously directing this energy, or are you letting the world siphon it away without resistance? Think of how often you've wasted energy on things that didn't deserve a single second of your attention. You defend yourself against criticisms that should have been ignored. You dive into pointless arguments just to prove you're right. You obsess over texts left unanswered, replaying conversations in your mind long after they ended. Every time you do this, you spend your inner strength on things that don't nourish you. Jung had a phrase that captures this cycle perfectly. What you resist persists. The more you react, the more you bind yourself to the very thing you wish to escape. Your reactions don't free you. They chain you tighter. This is why so many people feel perpetually drained. They're not weak. They're not broken. They're simply misdirecting their psychic energy toward battles that only leave them exhausted. And exhaustion makes you vulnerable. Opportunists can sense it. Manipulative personalities pick up on it instantly. They see that you don't guard your energy, that you're quick to respond, eager to explain, desperate to please, and they exploit it. Jung believed that a healthy psyche knows how to contain energy within itself. This doesn't mean shutting down or becoming cold. It means practicing restraint. It means knowing how to say no without guilt, how to remain silent without feeling cowardly, how to observe before acting. Real power lies not in reacting, but in choosing when, how, and whether to respond at all. Consider this. How many nights have you lost sleep because of a conflict that remained unresolved in your mind? How many times have you relived an argument, rehearsed comebacks, or replayed what you should have said? Each of those moments is energy bleeding out of you, fueling ghosts of the past that should have been allowed to fade. Psychic energy, when well guarded, creates a powerful presence. Have you ever noticed someone who can walk into a room and command respect without uttering a word? That's not charisma alone. It's the magnetic strength of energy preserved, not wasted. On the other hand, when energy is poorly managed, you become invisible, reactive, fragile, and the world has little mercy for those who leak energy everywhere they go. The path forward begins with observation. Notice your triggers. What makes you react without thinking? What conversations leave you depleted? These are the points where your energy escapes, and they are also the gateways to transformation. And here, Jung uncovered a deeper layer. When you learn to conserve your energy, you disrupt the unconscious projections others place upon you. And that, he warned, is where the real battle begins, because your unavailability threatens the games others play. You might believe your reactions are conscious choices, but in reality, most of them are automatic programs. And here's the unsettling part. People who understand this can manipulate you with ease. They don't need to shout, threaten, or demand. All they need to do is press the right button, the one you've left exposed, and like clockwork, you react. Carl Jung described this phenomenon as projection. People project onto others what they cannot face within themselves. But there's another side that often goes unnoticed. The more emotionally available you are, the more you become a blank canvas for others' projections. You stop being seen for who you are, and instead become the screen on which others play out their unresolved issues. Think about it. That friend who only contacts you when they're in crisis, the partner who constantly needs you to rescue them, the person who showers you with praise, but only as long as you're useful. In these moments, they aren't engaging with you. They're engaging with the role they've assigned you, the savior, the comforter, the reliable fixer. And the reason you accept these roles so readily is because of fear. Fear of rejection, fear of disappointing, fear of being abandoned. The most effective manipulation doesn't come from shouting or aggression. It comes from silence. The guilt that gnaws at you when you consider saying no. You convince yourself you owe them your time, your energy, your understanding, even if it tears you apart inside. And the manipulator doesn't have to force you. All they need is for you to keep playing your role. But here's the breaking point. When you stop reacting, when you start saying no, when you answer with silence instead of explanations, the whole structure collapses. The projections fall apart. The mask others placed on you slips away. Suddenly, they're confronted not with the dependable version of you they counted on, but with their own emptiness, and that is deeply unsettling. Your unavailability forces them to face themselves, their unresolved needs, their own shadows. This is why they lash out. The criticism, the accusations, the emotional drama. These are not signs that you're doing something wrong. They're evidence that you've stopped being their convenient mirror. Jung once wrote, "We do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." When you withdraw from manipulative dynamics, the darkness of others rises to the surface, and many people cannot bear that. The question then becomes, are you prepared to face the backlash? Are you willing to endure being misunderstood, rejected, even attacked, for the simple act of protecting yourself? Because it is in that silence, uncomfortable and raw, that a new form of strength begins to take root. And this brings us to one of Jung's most profound insights. Silence itself can become your most powerful weapon. The modern world is unbearably noisy. Everyone is talking, arguing, defending, explaining. Social media trains us to respond instantly, to weigh in on every debate, to constantly prove that we exist by sharing our opinions. Yet Jung saw something radically different. True strength often comes not from speaking, but from silence. This isn't the silence of passivity or cowardice. It's not the silence of avoidance. It's what Jung considered a conscious silence, a deliberate withholding of your energy, a refusal to be dragged into battles that don't deserve you. Silence, when chosen intentionally, is not absence. It is amplified presence. When you stop reacting, you begin to observe. Patterns emerge that once went unnoticed. Repetitions in your relationships, cycles of manipulation, habits of self-sabotage. Where noise blinded you, silence gives clarity, and clarity can be dangerous to those who survive on your confusion. Have you ever noticed how some people panic when you don't respond, when you don't explain yourself, when you don't play your usual role? They spiral. It's not that they miss you. It's that your silence robs them of narrative control. As long as you keep talking, they know how to frame you, how to interpret you, how to bend your words to their story. But when you fall silent, you break the script, and that unsettles them, because now they must face their own inner noise. True silence is mastery over your own energy. It is choosing not to be provoked. It is refusing to let others dictate when you engage. Jung emphasized that individuation, the process of becoming your truest self, requires moments of withdrawal, because only in solitude can you hear your own voice above the roar of the world. But silence carries a price. It will distance you from those who only valued you for your utility. It will make you incomprehensible to those who only related to the mask you wore. Some will call you cold, arrogant, or selfish. But in truth, these are projections from people who never wanted your depth, only your function. Here's the paradox. The more selective you become with your words, the more powerful they become. Each sentence, each response, each yes gains weight because it is no longer automatic. You learn that not everyone deserves access to your truth. Sometimes silence is not retreat. It is sovereignty. And perhaps the greatest revelation Jung offers is this. The silence that unsettles others is secondary. The most powerful silence is the one that reconstructs you from within. In the stillness, where you no longer chase approval, you begin to recover your vital energy. You reconnect with your essence. And from that space, you begin to live differently, not as a reactor shaped by others, but as a creator shaping your own reality. Silence alone, however, is not enough. Jung reminded us that awareness without action is simply another form of self-deception. It's not enough to intellectually understand that you must protect your energy. You have to embody it in daily choices. Transformation begins when you decide, firmly and consistently, to become selective. Conscious unavailability is not about arrogance or indifference. It's not about rejecting everyone or closing yourself off from love. Instead, it's about becoming intentional with your energy, no longer saying yes by default, no longer replying instantly out of guilt, no longer participating in conversations or dynamics that drain you. It's about realizing that every yes you give to others is also a no to yourself, unless it's aligned with your truth. This shift often begins with small acts of discipline. You take a breath before reacting. You leave a heated discussion before being dragged into chaos. You silence your phone for a few hours without feeling guilty. You say, "Not today," or "I'm not interested," or simply, "No." And the most radical part, you stop justifying your choices. You don't owe anyone an explanation for your boundaries. You don't have to defend your silence. You don't need to prove that your refusal is reasonable. The moment you stop explaining yourself, you strip away others' ability to trap you in endless emotional negotiations. This is deeply unsettling for those who relied on your constant compliance. Jung spoke about sacred isolation, a period every person must go through to reclaim their identity. This is not a depressive withdrawal. but a necessary retreat, a time to step away from the constant noise of the collective, so you can finally hear your own voice. During this stage, you relearn who you are when you are not performing, not reacting, not trying to be everything for everyone. A useful measure of your progress is to observe how people respond when you become more reserved, who drifts away when you stop overgiving, who tries to provoke you when you no longer react, who accuses you of having changed when in fact you are finally protecting yourself. These reactions are not signs of failure. They're proof that you are breaking free. Of course, this new posture will feel uncomfortable at first. You'll feel guilty. You'll wonder if you're being selfish. You'll be told you're too distant, too harsh. But this discomfort is part of the deconstruction process. You've been trained for years, maybe decades, to put yourself second. Naturally, reclaiming yourself will feel unnatural at first. But over time, you'll see it clearly. Conscious unavailability is not rejection. It is self-determination. Each time you say no to the world, you're saying yes to yourself. Each time you withdraw from toxic dynamics, you affirm that your peace is worth more than counterfeit connection. And each time you refuse to explain your silence, you gain respect, even if only from yourself. When you begin practicing conscious unavailability, ruptures are inevitable. People who depended on your constant compliance will resist the change. They may accuse you of being selfish, cold, or ungrateful. But Jung taught us to see these reactions not as evidence that you're wrong, but as proof that you are finally free. Your absence exposes truths that others would rather avoid. It reveals just how much they relied on your emotional labor to regulate themselves. It forces them to face their own emptiness, their own wounds, their own shadows, and for many, this is intolerable. That's why the moment you stop feeding their patterns, they push harder. The attacks, the criticism, the emotional blackmail. It's all a desperate attempt to pull you back into the role you once played. But here's the paradox. The more you hold your ground, the more you'll notice that what you thought was connection was actually dependency. What you thought was love was often attachment to the comfort you provided, and what you believed was respect was in truth convenience. Your withdrawal doesn't destroy real relationships. It merely exposes which ones were built on illusion. This stage can feel painful. You will lose people. You may feel isolated. The guilt can return, whispering that maybe you're too harsh. But Jung insisted that individuation, the journey to becoming whole, requires this breaking away. You cannot discover your true self while clinging to roles that suffocate you. And here lies the gift hidden inside the rupture. With each relationship that falls away, you gain deeper clarity about who truly values you, those who remain, those who adapt to your boundaries, those who respect your new silence. These are the connections that matter. They don't need your constant availability to feel secure. They love you as you are, not as the role you perform. Over time, you begin to notice a new kind of solitude emerging. At first, it feels heavy, even frightening. But gradually, the silence shifts. What once felt like loneliness becomes a sacred space. What once felt like abandonment becomes self-presence. Jung described this as moving from outer noise to inner clarity. In this space, confusion gives way to peace. Anxiety fades into stillness. The constant hunger for external validation dissolves. And what takes its place is a strength unlike anything you've known before, the strength of being whole within yourself. This doesn't mean you'll live without relationships. It means you'll approach them differently, no longer from need, but from choice, no longer as someone seeking to be complete, but as someone already complete who chooses to share. And in that shift, you discover a freedom deeper than approval, deeper than belonging, the freedom of selfhood. When you stop being available to everyone, a profound rebirth begins. At first, there is silence, an uneasy silence that feels almost unbearable. You wonder if you've made a mistake. You question whether you're being too harsh. You fear losing people who once claimed to care for you. But slowly, that silence transforms. It ceases to feel like emptiness and begins to feel like cleansing. What follows is solitude, not the lonely absence of others, but the powerful presence of yourself. It is the solitude of the strong, the solitude of someone who no longer betrays themselves just to keep others close. In this solitude, clarity returns. Peace takes root where anxiety once lived. Strength emerges where neediness once dominated. Carl Jung taught that individuation requires stepping away from the collective mask, even if it means walking alone for a time. This temporary isolation is not an exile, it's a return. By withdrawing, you stop being molded by external demands and start shaping your reality from within. You shift from being a reactor to becoming a creator. And here is the liberating truth. When people fall away because you are no longer endlessly available, you realize they never truly wanted you. They wanted the role you played, When you stop performing that role, they don't know what to do with you, and that's freedom. You may lose people, but you find yourself. You may leave behind places, but you reconnect with your essence. You may be misunderstood, but you begin to be respected first and foremost by yourself. Because when you are no longer available for crumbs, for manipulation, for false affection, you make space only for what is real. You become rare. You become valuable. You become unforgettable. This is not an ending. It is a beginning. A life where you no longer measure your worth by how much you give away, but by how deeply you honor your own truth. A life where love is not earned through sacrifice, but shared through authenticity. So ask yourself, are you willing to pay the price of being free? Are you ready to be misunderstood, rejected, even judged, in exchange for living as your whole self? Because once you choose yourself fully, everything changes. And if this message resonates, support our channel by liking, sharing, and subscribing. Let's continue walking this path together, building a community where self-respect and authenticity are celebrated.